On today's episode of Sources, I'm truly honored to introduce a truly distinguished individual, Attorney Chandrawattie Persaud. With an impressive career spanning almost 2 decades, Attorney Persaud has made significant strides in the legal field, advocating for justice and human rights. Her expertise and dedication have not only earned her recognition in the courtroom, but also in her passionate work combating domestic violence. Through her unwavering commitment, she has provided legal support to those who need it the most, empowering victims and driving meaningful change in the fight against this deeply rooted issue. Hello, good day, and welcome to another edition of Sources. I'm your host, Svetlana Marshall, and with me today I have attorney at law, Chandrawattie Persaud. Ms. Persaud, you're more than attorney. You served as a pupil teacher, a student teacher, as they say, but also a nurse. And so before we get into that legal battle, tell me about your life as a student teacher.
Excellent. So once I finished my classes at the Anna Regina Multilateral School on the Essequibo Coast, my grade 6 teacher thought that I need not waste time, just come back and give some hours at the school. And this school would have been the Aurora Primary School. That's my alma mater. And subsequently, I did a couple of years after, maybe 1 or 2 years at the Good Hope Primary School. And those years were excellent because it allowed me to be able to now deal with persons outside of my category as a student at high school, and also be able to now communicate effectively with children and to begin to share the knowledge that I would have acquired.
You later then registered to be a nurse, to do the training program. What inspired you to practice nursing?
Now, when I reflect on that, it could have been better, and I blame it on this. At that time when I left high school, there wasn't sufficient career guidance. And every time I hear about career guidance today and career day and fair and all of that, I reflect on the past, because I would have already been maybe a doctor specialized in some other field. What happened is that because there was no proper career guidance, I ended up doing the registered nurse program. But Dr. Hanuman, Yuli Hanuman, Max Hanuman, all those professional doctors would have always said to me, "We need you to do medicine." But then that's a different story, because later on, after I became a nurse, I didn't want to work night duty anymore. And as a result of that, I kind of hide from them. Every time I see them, I hide from them because I don't want them to approach me to join the medicine program. But what inspired me to be a nurse is that I always had this, I always like how a nurse look, always neat, tidy, well-groomed, well-dressed, and I always see myself as a person who would have wanted to be a nurse, not knowing what nursing entailed. That basically inspired me.
What scared you about the night shift?
I like to sleep. I like my bed. And the hours away from home, the way we grew up in Essequibo Coast, at 6 o'clock, once the place got dark, you were supposed to be indoors. And so the night scared me tremendously. To leave home at 8:30 in the evening to go to work I will get palpitations. And I did that for a number of years, more than 10 years, after which I decided I think I need to stop night duty, working in the night.
And so you just quit the profession?
I did not quit the profession. So while at the hospital, I became the workers' voice. The voice for the workers at the Georgetown Public Hospital. And so the public service union which serviced those workers, I became attached to that union, representing the interests and the rights of workers. And that is still in me. Even today, I still look out for the advice that I will give to people. I still look out for people on the whole, whether they need advice on their rights as workers. That is still part of me, has never left me.
Was it that propelled you to the legal profession? And at what
Certainly.
age did you sign up for law?
Right. Age is a thing I don't recall. It's very embarrassing to say that on public television, but I think I was in my early 30s. And what happened at that time was after I became an advocate for workers' rights, the Public Service Union itself, the Guyana Public Service Union itself, had me attached to the union while I still work with the Ministry of Health. And I worked at different levels, the education section, the industrial relations section, and then I acted and became the General Secretary of the Public Service Union for a number of years. While there, I recognized that if something was missing. And because whenever we sit at negotiating tables with semi-autonomous agencies, with the government, Dr. Gopal being the public service ministry PS at the time, there was always something that you will hear about the law. The law doesn't allow this to happen, the law doesn't allow that to happen. And so I felt that I needed to complete this law program, which now brings everything in perspective, bring everything in line. And so I could have negotiated better, I had better knowledge as to how we should treat with issues generally and specifically.
And so in 2008, you were admitted to the Guyana Bar.
That's right. So I would have finished UG, the 3 years at the University of Guyana, and then I went on to Ewing Law School for 2 years, did the bar, and so in 2008 I was admitted.
You're a specializer. You have expertise in health, education, and now law. What are some of the areas you practice in, and why so?
Great. So I practice both criminal and the civil law. Criminal law will take in all the those magistrate court proceedings, and basically are the traffic offenses, the assault and the grievous bodily harm, those kinds of issues. That's criminal law. And then for civil law has many branches. You have the family division, you have the probate division, you have the land division, you have separate different issues, but they're all under civil proceedings. But I enjoy family court proceedings most, and that meshes with me ensuring that there is equality before the law for especially women. I also feel that gender justice is an important aspect, and given my background, I always want to ensure that there is justice for my clients at the end of the day. One issue that is very troubling still, though, is domestic violence issue. Yeah. All right, domestic violence issues, I believe, needs to take a different approach. Of course, we know we have to follow the legislation that are in place. I've recognized that the United Nations is now trying to have an optional protocol, which will now relook at the existing convention dealing with these issues. And I believe that once we are able to get the optional protocol, we will see different interventions, because we will now have to follow the protocol once we sign on. And I don't see why we should not sign on, because this is a worldwide issue. We are one of the countries that's very heavily affected by domestic violence. And I don't see this going away in the near future. Given what's happening, it's public knowledge what is going on presently, what is being experienced, and this does not mean that men do not experience similar kind of violence, but in the main, we know that females are greatly affected.
You mentioned domestic violence, and you mentioned a new protocol that is being established. Let's zoom in a bit on domestic violence. In 2016, if I'm correct, you launched a report addressing the prosecution rate when it comes to domestic violence cases, and you dealt a bit with the perpetrators. Tell me a bit about that report. What were the findings? What were the recommendations? And so many years after, do you see those recommendations being implemented?
Well, let me start with the last question first. I don't believe that the recommendations are being implemented, because we do not see the court forms or the forms that are put in place to be filled up. We don't see basic information on those forms, and so it is difficult to capture the many variables that a researcher will want to deal with whenever you're doing a research. The recommendations were for certain systems to be put in place. I cannot say that nothing is being done. The question is whether what is being done is done across the board and how effective, even if there were some interventions given the recommendations, the question is whether they're being followed, because there are different levels of operations. And what we need to see, however, is the awareness, the need to capture information in a manner in which anyone else can pick up the reports, pick up the files and say, well, for sure, this is exactly the representation of the numbers, the issues, by gender, that kind of thing. What we do see happening is when the complainants, meaning the persons who went to the court to complain about domestic violence, and that can be a man or a woman. When I said it, they are mainly female. What we see happening is at the end process, we do get the orders which they may seek. Most time the orders are restraining orders to keep the peace between the parties, or for one party to stay away from the other, or do not interfere, do not call, do not do anything that aggravates the situation, and you should respect the court order. There's no respect for court orders. That's my experience.
Why so? Why do you believe there's no respect for the orders?
There's no respect for the orders simply because when the person who obtained the order goes intend that the order work and prevent the other person from, or restrain the other person from doing that which they should not do, it is being done all the time. Respect for the orders has to do with, I have a court order, I must respect it. And if the law allows there's a system to be in place, if the order is not respected, then what happens? But you find that the police has not been doing sufficient. I'm not saying that they have not been doing anything. They have not been doing sufficient to enforce, have the orders enforced. When an order is violated, the report is made to the police. The police has certain things to do, and the police must do it. The reports I've had from my clients are that the police oftentimes are either friends with the perpetrators, and so they can't find them. I don't have a number for them. I can't contact them. And in the meantime, the frustration continues from the other side because the violations are there. They call them, they turn up in their face, they put a vehicle across the road, they block the path. In the night, they stalk the homes.
And have you seen this end up in debt?
Not as yet, for those who I am acquainted with. But what I know is that professionals, including doctors, and endure this kind of breach of a court order. And the frustration is there. Imagine a consultant has to go to work in the morning to deal with over 100 patients waiting to see her. But I'm getting a call at 6 o'clock. I can't leave my home because the perpetrator has blocked my entrance. And the police has done nothing to date. I'm home at 8 o'clock when I'm supposed to be at work. What am I to do?
What would be your message, since we're on that issue, to policymakers, to the police officers who are listening, the ones higher up, to ensure that not only this issue of enforcement, protection orders and so forth, but in the menu of laws that are available, ensure that they are enforced, and if they're weak, they're strengthened?
I think, Ms. Marshall, I believe we have very good laws on the books. The difficulty I see is enforcement, and the persons who are in place to enforce them are not following the legal parameters within which they should function and what they should do. It is clear what they should be doing, but they have not been doing that, and they do that without any regard for the law, which they uphold, which they swear to uphold. They do that without understanding or wanting to understand that when we do not function the way we ought to function, it affects somebody else. And when you think about a ripple effect, let's take, for example, the consultant who faced so many difficulties. She has to go to work. She has over 100 persons waiting on her for service. So when we look at the ripple effect, when you think you're affecting one person, oh no, you're not. You're affecting, where professionals are concerned, you're affecting others, many others. And therefore, the enforcement team, I say a team because it's not one person, the enforcement team must understand that if they have a function to do, then stay within the parameters of the law, not because you are familiar with Mary Jones or Tom Dalgetty or just random calling names. All right, you are going to do what you think will be in their best interest, ignoring the interests of others in the process. The awareness sessions, I'm aware that the awareness sessions, sensitization sessions with some of the police officers have been ongoing. The question is, are they really willing? Have they learned enough? Are they willing to implement what they have learned?
And aside from the police officers, do you think the justice system is doing enough? The local justice system is sufficient to respond to these cases? Do you think there's need for a specialization?
Excellent, and you've touched it right on the head. I'm always of the respectful view that there ought to be a specialized court to deal with domestic violence. The fact being, domestic violence, and we haven't. This is not the first time I believe I'm saying this. Domestic violence doesn't or didn't start yesterday or this morning. The parties have been having ongoing issue for maybe 5 years, 10 years. And there is no court, as far as I'm aware, that handles domestic violence matters take time out to go back to understanding the issues the parties are facing. And therefore, if you do not understand the nature and the extent of the issues which the parties are facing, how can you find a resolution? And it is not only the magistrate court to be working on this issue. The support services must be in place. Counseling services. Of course, we know there are counseling services. The question is, are they mandatory? Can they be mandatory in certain instances, in certain circumstances? What do we do to follow up? What social services are in place to assist those who may have to seek services for which they may have to pay? What social services are in place to ensure that persons are, they feel safe going forward, all right? Or they feel safe coming out to say, I am tired of this, I'm fed up of this, without feeling that their safety is further endangered.
Okay. And so sometimes when we hear of domestic violence cases, we hear another mother was shot or chopped, badly injured. Persons often ask, why did she stay in that relationship? As a lawyer who've engaged people, women, on a daily basis, what would you say are some of the factors influencing women's decision, and what could be done to address those factors?
Excellent question. And so we have been hearing over and so many sources, research also found what are some of these factors, and as such the question is whether we can ever or will ever be able to address all these factors. A woman on the whole, or a woman on the whole who remain in such a situation contemplates what she should do next. I have 5 children, they're minors. I do not work because of 5 children. I couldn't go to work. I had to stay home to take care of them, to ensure that their needs are met on a daily basis. And so I'm not the breadwinner. I have no income. If I leave, what happens? If I leave, who takes care of my children? If I leave, where am I going to go? All right? I have no money of my own. Or even if I leave and I try to find a job, I have no education to the level that I can seek a medium to high income job, which will allow me to rent somewhere of my own, meet all the expenses that I have or have been accustomed to. The environment which I once lived in, I will not have that environment anymore. Would I be able to cope? What am I going to do? On the other hand, for a woman or a female who has sufficient education or high level, medium to high level education, has a job, can easily move on because they have a source of income. And so they can move on without even glancing over their shoulder to say, I will not be part of this arrangement anymore because I am empowered enough to move forward with my own life. And so some of those factors are preventing females who find themselves in such a predicament to move on without looking over their shoulder as to what is going to happen. Right present, as we speak presently now, one of my clients has to choose whether she will remain in the home with her 2 girls. 2 girls, and these are 2 very intelligent children, 7 years old and 13 years old. She has to contemplate whether I am going to move on with them without a father because we can no longer live in this environment. We can no longer come home in the afternoon and endure no electricity, but where the room he occupies, he is having sufficient light in his room because he turned off all the other lights. This is a 7-year-old child is saying, what's going on here? How can we live here anymore? So the trauma that children are going through, where children are in with such relationships, is unbelievable. And adults tend to think that, oh, they're children, they don't understand, they wouldn't understand, and they don't. Oh, we're mistaken. That's a big mistake. They understand, they see, they hear, they view, and they have a view to express about what is taking place in the home.
And what can be done?
Exactly. Some of our women are still fearful of going out to seek help. Some of our women are still see it as taboo to go talk to other people as to what they are facing. What others will think about them is a big issue. What church members who may hear about it will think about them is a big issue, especially where the woman is a professional. And so it's quite a lot that we have to still do to capture people, women, and even men in these situations, to let them really understand what is really wrong and what is really right.
So I could imagine the amount of cases you tackle on a daily basis. How do you strike a balance as a mom, and how do you ensure that what you do professionally doesn't affect your personal life? And it's important to strike that balance.
All right, before I answer that question, when I was doing my research for the thesis on the Master of Public Health, the research shows that persons who are involved with domestic violence issues may or may not be affected negatively. Now, the way I cope with it is to, I do my best to counsel. I'm not a professional counselor. I do my best to counsel clients and to bring them to a level, to bring them to a place where they can see that they have options. And when I do that, I feel the release, because I've done I've done enough to take them to a place where they are able to now, they're empowered to an extent to be able to make a decision what I must do. Because I sit and I talk with them from a level of, what are your options? How much more would you want to endure? How much more can you endure without losing your sanity? All right, and this is where I feel empowered, given that I have the knowledge, being a nurse, I have a master in public health, I've done quite a lot of reading, I've done quite a lot of programs, and so I feel I have sufficient information which now empowers me to transfer some of that kind of thinking to my clients so they're able to make the best decisions. I've encountered one which I respect her views totally. She is very much involved in the church, and in the eyes of God, she should not be a person who should initiate the divorce proceedings. And I respect that totally. We have had discussions, and she has come to the point where, if it reaches a stage where I have to now speak to the Lord and say that, forgive me, but I can endure no more, and this is what I have to do, I will have to do it. So, but I feel at the end of the day, I feel released. I can switch on my cap as an attorney at law and deal with issues, and I can switch it off the moment I leave office. I can switch it off because I do my best on a daily basis to advise clients on all their options. What are your best options? Let them see, if you continue with one line only, where it's going to take you, the path you can end up in, and as against if you take the other side. And so I leave it to them having all the options available, all the important information available, legal and otherwise, sometimes socially as well, sometimes physically as well, sometimes emotionally. And so, they go away with all of this information, and they take time out now to analyze, and then get back to me to say, I've looked at everything, I've reviewed everything, and I decide that, this is the best way forward. And I feel released.
Okay.
I feel released.
And what's next for you as we wrap up? Is there another career path that you're looking at?
Oh, certainly. To cap all of this, of course, yes, the icing on top of the, it's the toppings will certainly be the PhD. All right, I'm contemplating that next. Of course, that's a big one, and I have to ensure that I have time. But time is always in my favor, I think, because I've done that for how many years. And my son always say to me, don't worry, Mom, you're a perpetual student. And no matter what, I think he's right. Yeah. I think he's right. He's recognized that a long time. And I think I'm going to, I've already considered that. I've already done some planning, and therefore I'm heading down that path.
To do your PhD.
Yes.
All the best with that.
Thank you.
And thank you for the work that you continue to do on a daily basis. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Sources. I've been your host, Svetlana Marshall.